break. We welcome you back because we're going to get started again in just a few minutes with our historic Berry Street essay. Welcome back, welcome back. I do have one announcement to bring to your attention right now, if I could have your attention for just a moment. We've had a request for designated support space for religious professionals who are parents or caregivers of trans and non-binary children. There is a support space for all parents and caregivers of trans and non-binary children in the convention center today. We're also going to add a space specifically for religious professionals. So if that includes you, immediately following the Berry Street in the Amistad room here in the Hilton, we'll have a mutual support space. Care team members will be there. So if that would be nurturing to you, please join us there. Come on in, find your space, and give us another minute or two, and then we'll get started.
Familiar saying, I will lay my troubles down by the water, where the river will never run dry. Hallelujah. I'm gonna let myself be loved. I'm gonna let myself be loved. I'm gonna let myself be loved. By and by, I will lay my troubles down by the water, where the river will never run dry. It's been said, and I do believe as you ask, so shall you receive. So take from me these troubles, bring me sweet release, where the river will never run dry. Hallelujah. I'm gonna let myself be loved. I'm gonna let myself be loved. I'm gonna let myself be loved. By and by, I will lay my troubles down by the water, where the river will never run dry.
you want me to remove this so you have more light?
Feeling inside, so deep and so wide, so open and free. When love is revealed, all beings are here, so naturally. When you let go of fear, the truth will appear, so simple and clear.
Right, so hopefully.
When you let go of fear, the truth will appear, so simple and clear. Let your light show the way, forever to stay in this circle of friends. Let your heart be a guide to lead you inside where love never ends.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Connie.
Are we ready? Have you been having fun this ministry days? Okay. My name is the Reverend Connie Simon. I am a fat, brown-skinned woman with salt and pepper hair cornrowed into a bun. I'm wearing a black and tan patterned dress, purple and teal glasses, and hooped earrings made out of wood. I use she, her pronouns, and it is my honor to convene the 204th Ministerial Conference in Berry Street. Please join me now in a moment of reflection and reverence as we light our chalice, the chosen symbol of our faith, with these words by Peter Scott Lee. We light our chalice in honor of all those who served in our ministry. May the chalice be to us a symbol of the sharing of faith and hope which they have brought. May the flame remind us of the giving of their lives and love upon the altar of service and truth. So before I start my scribal remarks, this is going to throw off these folks, but there's a thing we didn't get to do last time because we were virtual. We didn't get to clap in person for outgoing scribe Kate Walker. Thank you, Kate. In 1820, Unitarian ministers gathered at Berry Street for the first time. They came together not in celebration, but in uncertainty. They had recently broken from Orthodox Christianity, Congregationalism, enduring the sting of being called heretics, infidels, and destroyers of the Christian faith. Their congregations were split, their reputations were questioned, and their very salvation was doubted by former colleagues. The country was a mess. My people remained enslaved. Industrial capitalists were building empires. White supremacy culture was in full force. But many of these colleagues, not all of them, championed rational discourse in an age of passionate division, welcomed the outsider when communities preferred the familiar, and proclaimed the worth of every soul when society accepted rigid social orders. Here we are in 2025. Same story, different day. We're still trying to minister to our people in the midst of white supremacy xenophobia, racism, and capitalism, doing our best to minister in an era when the truth itself is contested and the very foundations of democracy strain under pressure. Our 1820 predecessors were dismissed as too intellectual, too optimistic about human nature, too willing to question sacred texts. Some might say the same about us today. They were told they weakened Christianity. We're told that we dilute spirituality itself. Yet consider what united those early ministers with us today. An unshakable faith in the human capacity for growth, in reason as a gift of the divine, and in love as the thing that holds it all together. Like us, they responded to the call to build beloved community right here, right now. Those ministers of 1820 felt the weight of standing for unpopular truths. They grappled with the delicate balance of challenging conscience while preserving relationship. They worked to hold their communities together even as they called society to transformation. Does any of that sound familiar to anybody in this room? Whew. But here's what I find most remarkable. They didn't retreat. Facing ridicule and resistance, they leaned into their calling, understanding that liberal religion is not a spectator sport. It demands courage to act on our convictions. And we inherit both their challenges and their courage. In our polarized times, when misinformation spreads faster than wisdom, when communities fracture along ideological lines, when despair tempts us towards cynicism, we are called to be what they were, ministers of hope, agents of reconciliation, and prophets of possibility. Like them, we serve not because the path is easy, but because the need is great. Like them, we trust that this Unitarian Universalist faith has something to offer to our weary world. Those first ministers sparked a flame. Today, we tend that fire, not as museum curators, but as living torchbearers, carrying light into our own dark corners and illuminating the path forward. May their courage inspire our own. May their faith sustain our ministry. And may we prove worthy of the trust they placed in liberal religion's future, a future that is now ours to shape. It is our tradition at the conference in Berry Street for the outgoing member of the executive committee to offer our invocation. Please welcome Reverend Aisha Ansano.
Hello, beloveds. I'm Reverend Aisha Ansano. I use she, her pronouns. I am a short, small, fat, light-skinned brown woman with curly hair pulled back, wearing a cobalt blue dress. And beloveds, I invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer and contemplation. Bring yourselves fully into this space, grounding your body and your spirit in this place and this moment. Spirit of life, God of many names and none, Holy One that surrounds us. We gather in the midst of everything, to be together and to receive together powerful words. We hold in blessing today our essayist, Leela Sinha. May her powerful words settle in our hearts and ignite our spirits. May they feel held in love by this gathered body. We bless all of the time and energy that Leela has spent preparing for this moment, and we enter into it together with gratitude. We give gratitude also for our essay respondent, for all who made this moment possible, for all who are present today. As we receive these words, may we be blessed by them and carry them forward in our lives. In gratitude, in blessing, and in love. Amen.
The Berry Street Conference has some rather arcane rules. It's been around a while, and there are some things from the past that we've kept. And one of those things is to nominate a moderator from the floor to introduce our speaker. Do I hear a name of any moderator? Rodney Lemery has been nominated from the floor. I hereby close all of the nominations and declare that by acclamation, the Reverend Dr. Lemery will announce our speaker.
Hello, dear colleagues. If you are surprised to see me here, I am as well. I'm Reverend Rodney Lemery. I am a queer, fat, middle-aged, still, white male. My pronouns are he and him. Life sometimes throws you some surprises. And today, it is my great, yet surprised, awesome, surprised honor to introduce a lovely human. And I'm going to do this by reading some words that were not written by me. The Reverend Lila Sina is a storyteller, a painter of worlds, the wizard you need to meet in the woods so you learn to use your magic without blowing up everything around you. After a childhood with one stable address and theoretically clear goals, Lila tossed everything into the air to find out what needed to happen instead. Lila moved to the Midwest for college, and since then has been in IT, theater tech, fine woodworking, bodywork, coaching, bread making, and half a dozen other things. I noticed what's missing on here is a fantastic spoken word poet. Lila has lived in France, Portugal, India, Canada, and across the northern US, with and without partners, with and without housemates, with and without a clear direction. Does that sound familiar? Since founding the Intensives Institute, Lila has gotten clear on the mission and the vision, as well as the goal, to give intensives a space and a world, let's be real, where we can flourish and use those powers for good. Now, Lila is going to get to do it, and we all get to do it with Lila. It is my great privilege and honor to introduce the Reverend Lila Sina.
Thank you, Rodney. One of the challenges of these beautifully sleek tech setups is that they take a little adjusting to. So before I begin officially, my name is Lila Sinha. I am a 5'2", light brown skin, mixed South Asian and white human with a blue and white outfit and short, dark hair and dark eyes. First, I want to express my deep gratitude to the committee, to Jeanette and Reverend Melissa and the whole UUMA staff, to everyone who has kindly and enthusiastically supported me, and to all of you for being here in community for the collective work of continuing to become ourselves but better. And to non-US listeners, if you're not from the US, you may find what I have to say less or differently relevant, and if that feels not quite right, I am sorry. We do have a history of failing to be as inclusive as we might be of our international members, and I hope that you will find here enough to support your ministry, no matter where you are from. Finally, before I start, I want to say this. I know this is the Berry Street essay, and that its long history is to stick mostly to theory. I also know that these times are not like other times, although as Connie pointed out, somewhat they are, and we maybe stick to theory at our peril. So we'll have some theory, some practice, some story. Mischief and its power is preserved through story, and we can put some respect there from here. So with that, let us begin. Imagine for a moment that you are not surrounded. Imagine for a moment that there is nothing clawing at your back, no teeth, no graveling, looming shadow, no threatening clouds. Imagine for a moment that you are surrounded, surrounded not just one or two deep, not just in this room, but all the way to the edge of a benevolent universe, surrounded by people who value health and happiness, community and joy. Imagine that within us, among us, we are not fighting. Don't flinch. Don't tell me it's too painful to dream. If hope has a cost, if progress has a cost, let this be it. For once, our suffering can mean something. If there is torture we inflict on ourselves, let it cease. If there is unneeded misery, let it cease. Let us create the world we want here, beginning now. We are in a crisis, and our job is to write our way out, to sing our way out, to talk our way out. Our job is to lead the way out. Our job is to listen, listen, listen until we hear the way out. Our job is to get us all out, to get us free together. What our job is not is to pretend that this is smaller or simpler or easier than it is, to downplay or gaslight or ignore. Our job is not to lull each other and our people into a false sense of security until the water begins to bubble. Our job is not to acquiesce, to go along, to flow, to go with it. Our job is not to get people killed, disappeared, injured, separated, trapped. Our job is to speak the truth in love, and help one another. Seeking will only get us so far. At some point, we have to say the thing and then do it. But we know something. We know that we cannot just say it bald-faced sometimes. Sometimes we know that the fear in everyone's hearts will likely mean that they will stop their ears and refuse to hear, that they will ignore the Jeep, the rowboat, and the helicopter, and then accuse us of abandoning them when they're drowning on the rooftops. We have seen this before. We have seen it in the Bible with the prophets, with Moses and the Red Sea. People are people, and we are ever thus. This is not new. And we are no better than others. It is on us to reach deep for the guidance and press past the insistent desire to pretend that it's all okay. It's okay, I'm fine. It is on us, particularly us. This is the mantle we took up. This is the stole we donned on the days of our ordinations in answer to our call. That is what we committed to. We are not at liberty to ignore it. We, of all people, we are not at liberty to ignore it. We were made for this, made over in the fires and water of formation. We were made for this. What we need is a transformative mischief. We've been trying to be good. But maybe we've been trying too hard. Maybe we're being too earnest. Maybe we are wanting the good grade in goodness more than we're wanting the result, a thing that is both normal to want and possible to achieve. But here's where the mischief comes in. Mischief and play are close twins. Playing is the fastest way to learn. There's that statistic that says that it takes hundreds of repetitions or months to learn something, unless you learn it while playing, in which case it takes weeks. Unfortunately, we lost the citation because the researcher died with incomplete notes. But play lights up different parts of our brains. It engages our neuroplasticity in different ways, and that's where the mischief is. That's why it's so important. A transformative mischief is a game of imagination, not a game in the competitive sense, but in the possibility sense, in the well, why not sense. We need a game, a way in, a secret door, a secret door. So when I was a child, I attended church at our congregation in Stamford, Connecticut. It is a beautiful old stone building going back to when we were Universalists and Unitarians and we were building buildings in downtowns. And along the back of the chancel is a curved panel of carved wooden arches. But one of those panels is different. One day they showed us, I think it was probably coming of age, that one panel was an actual door, the kind of door the minister could step out of onto the chancel, although in my time there he never did. The building is old enough that the fellowship hall is behind the chancel and the door faces the street, so the minister always came from the front of the sanctuary anyway. But that door was magic. It captivated me. I don't remember much about that church anymore. I left when I was 13, but I remember that still. I remember that feeling, that inexplicable draw to the mischief and mystery of that door, that sneaky entrance of the sacred. It was part of my call, probably, that small voice whispering, probably, but it is so emblematic of subtle change. We cannot lie to ourselves or each other about the crisis we are in, but neither can or should we assume that the only way to get the message across is a sledgehammer. I have been in my life perhaps a little too fond of sledgehammers. When the frustration and the fear and the passion, the love for us or for the world builds high enough, it's hard not to want to do something that will crash through the resistance. But when I was in massage school, I learned something. The fascia in your muscles gets stuck to itself like wadded up saran wrap. And if you try to unwad it by just pulling on it, it tears. But if you lay it flat, press your fingers through it slowly, like swimming through cornstarch and water, slowly and broadly, it'll work itself out. If you enter a muscle from a place that is already soft and go along the lines of tension, it will open. Way will open. Possibility will open. You cannot beat tyranny with a baseball bat and expect it to relent. That is not how any of the stories go, not Snow Treasure, not even D-Day, not the Revolutionary War. But there are stories and there are natural inclinations that offer another path that we can follow. Snow Treasure and D-Day and the Revolutionary War, Aikido and Hamilton. We have choices, we have a job, and we have ourselves. We collectively have one of the best sets of labs for learning how to do things differently. We are not going to succeed following the ancient rules of engagement with row after row of soldiers all marching in perfect lines. We don't have that kind of force, and it's not who we want to be. We lose integrity when we do that. We must find another way. Sometimes we'll fail, sometimes we'll succeed, but it will go much better when we experiment first on a small scale, right? Little proof of concept going on. Every one of our organizations is small scale enough. Small enough to be nimble, small enough to be resilient, small enough to be clever, small enough to take chances. Even our large churches, the 1,200 and 1,800 member ones, even the institution of the UUA itself is small enough. In Hamilton, they sing, "Take the bullets out your guns, we move undercover and we move as one. We cannot let a stray gunshot give us away." It's describing a real battle in which they took the bullets out of their guns because they didn't have enough ammunition. They weren't going to win that way. It was too risky to have the bullets. Something might go wrong. So they didn't have the firepower. That wasn't how they were going to do things. Instead, nighttime approach, fixed bayonets, no shooting. We have to choose terms on which we can prevail as us. We get to choose our terms. We get to choose the terms. Part of our gift as ministers, as leaders, as religious communities, part of our gift is to live into that which is possible and not that which we are told by the forces of empire we must accept. The forces of empire do not serve the people, and it has ever been thus. We, importantly, do not serve the empire, and it should have ever been thus. Since we cannot change the past, the second best time to begin is now. Even in worlds and times before times, institutions of faith have always had the possibility, the opportunity to create something different. In Saving Paradise, we hear from our colleagues Rita Nakashima-Brock and Rebecca Parker, even the early Christian church was not a force of empire. They gathered to create community, to have something different, to take care of each other. Faith as resistance, faith as care. Other new faiths or branches of faiths were also created to make alternatives. New religion itself is sometimes a transformative mischief. Even as faiths have been bent and twisted to serve the powers around them, they have also offered something else. For every faction that bent the knee, there was a faction that kept its honor. So despite the horrors, we also come from a long line of offering an alternative to the visions of empire, not just the imagined future of the empire, but the enlivened present. It doesn't have to be this way, we say. It can be different. It could be different now, right now. Claudia Steinbaum gets that. She's doing it now. She has an 83% approval rating 5 months into her presidency in Mexico. I went down there recently, graffiti everywhere shouted joy about her. She serves her people, and they are delighted. They're excited to get help, to be served. The country she serves is aligned behind that service to the people, and it is glorious. This is a leadership we can learn from. And there are others, like Hamilton, like Aikido, like Robin Hood. Story time. I fell in love with Robin Hood when I was really young. One of my earliest memories is being in the haunted house in the children's chapel at the Westport Church in a borrowed Robin Hood costume when I was 5 years old. I loved this costume. I was so in love with it, and it wasn't mine to keep, like we had borrowed it from a family friend, but it was one of the few times that I had a costume that actually was what I imagined it could be. You know how often you get like a disappointing Halloween costume? And it was also one of the first times I felt like I was who I wanted to be. For a minute, I was in my aspirational form. But somewhere in there, in the chapel, in the dark of the haunted house, my special Robin Hood hat got lost, you know, the bicocket hat. And I was inconsolable. I came out and I sobbed and I sobbed and I sobbed. And finally, they had to pause the haunted house, turn on the lights, find the hat, bring it to me. Bless the Westport Youth Group of 1980. When I was 7, I read Howard Pyle's Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, which is this like thick, pseudo-Old English volume. And to me, that's the definitive collection. It was there that I found the stories that showed me why I would like him, why I would admire him, why he was who I wanted to be when I grew up. He's still that important. He's still who I want to be when I grow up. There's a lot to work with. Robin Hood is kind of like Jesus. He has this mythos, this legend that surrounds him. We don't 100% know that he existed, but we're pretty sure that there was somebody with sort of that name who may or may not have been good, but who was definitely a robber, who sometime lived around the 1300s, lived maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little later, we're not sure. We know the jest of Robin Hood, which is a poetic form, is from the 1300s, and we know that there are many stories about him after that for so long that we know that it is impossible that all of them are about the same person. But the body of stories around Robin Hood has become a kind of mythological, ethical text that we can take for some advice. As with Jesus, at some point it only sort of matters whether it really happened. What matters is that people preserved these stories They told these stories, repeated these stories, were inspired by these stories. What matters is that they changed how they thought and how they acted because of these stories. Like the stories about Jesus, there are some stories that show up again and again and again, some stories that are somewhat verifiable by tracking other characters in these stories, some characters who are very old, some characters who are more recent, all characters straddling the line between fiction and some ancient soul-deep truth. As far as we know, this myth is about a bunch of men who gathered in a forest, at first as outlaws, banding together to take care of each other, to live in community, and then to do crimes. But not just any crimes. At first, survival crimes. Not the same survival crimes as the early Christian church, but not that different. Killing deer so they could eat, stealing gold so they could survive. And then mostly crimes to right the wrongs done by the evil and exploitative who had driven them to the woods in the first place. By the time the stories start to coalesce and take the form that we know today, Robin is under the protection of King Richard the Lionhearted, who is away fighting the Crusades. That has its own ethical issues. But in this body of stories, they are largely abstracted. Richard's brother John has been left in charge, and here's where we start to see the moral shape of the story. Prince John is selfish. Prince John wants to enrich himself. Prince John doesn't care about the people that he is charged with caring for, nor does he have a very good handle on how to run a country. No version of this story draws this picture more clearly than the classic Disney film, the one with the fox for Robin. I have never seen a lion more craven than John in that movie. Being a noble has always meant that you are supposed to be taking care of the people under you. You were supposed to be making sure that you provided for their needs. You were supposed to be making sure that if they were supporting you, that you were using the proceeds to support them. That's not always how it worked out, but that's how it was supposed to work. We always knew what a good king or good noble was, even when it wasn't happening. Prince John did not do any of that. The implication is that King Richard would have, although we never see King Richard in the actual stories because he's out of town. And there's no one who can go over the king. The king is where everything stops. So Robin Hood can't, enraged though he might be by the corruption he sees in Prince John, cannot effectively, directly fight back. There's no raising an army to overthrow the king's representative, not in that moment, not in that kingdom. So what does he do instead? What can you do instead when you know that direct confrontation will have little or no impact on the outcome? What can you do instead when you know you don't have the people or the weapons or the social or political power to straight up replace one leader with another, and the king, who could have been a king, is gone? He's out of town. This is before cell phones. And anyway, what are you going to do? Write him a letter that says, "Dear King Richard, please come back. Your brother's being a jerk." Now, Robin Hood does have the advantage of knowing that King Richard will come back eventually if he doesn't get killed. But he also has the disadvantage of not knowing at all when that will be. Meanwhile, he has to make things better in the moment, because people are suffering and starving and being executed and dying in that moment, not later, not in the future. The future matters, but it doesn't matter as much as the now, because without something changing, there will be no appreciable future to worry about. So he has to make things better, starting with himself, with a bounty on his head because he shot a deer in the king's forest, and the foresters are petty bureaucrats who are drunk on small power. He has to make things better without getting himself killed, because if he gets himself killed, he's no longer able to do anything. So what skills does he have? What are his tools? What is the locus of his power? People talk a lot about Robin Hood's prowess with the bow and arrow, and he was an incredibly good shot. But his true gift was his craftiness, his creativity, his wiliness, his mischievousness, his ability to come in under the wire and change things before anyone noticed and then slip out again like a fox, and his charisma. These are the stories that people living under a tyrant told about their hero. What their hero looked like, what they needed, how he would lead, what kind of person he would be, and how cleverly he used the system he was in for his own ends. He would go to the tournament that was bait, that was supposed to attract him so he could be trapped. He would go in disguise. And then he would leave behind some kind of calling card in the spirit of, I want them to know it was me. There's even one story about how he got himself employed in the castle. And he worked there for some time, having fun, redistributing resources, making connections, learning the layout. And then he quit before he could be found out, but he goes back later that night to shoot an arrow with a scroll on it through the window while dinner is being served, because now he knows where dinner is being served, to say, oh yeah, that was me. This is not an act of hubris. Well, okay, maybe it's a little bit of an act of hubris. But it's an act of destabilization. I know you. I know your household. I lived under your roof and you didn't even notice. Look sharp, I'm only not dangerous because I don't want to be. He was also a different kind of highway robber. He would stop a party of wealthy people on the highway like every other robber, but he wouldn't attack them. He'd bring them back to the forest and feast with them. He'd get them laughing and drinking good beer and eating venison, the king's deer. He'd do the things they didn't expect. He'd engage them in the pleasures of the outlaw life, of life on the other side of the Great Divide. He'd change the narrative. He didn't want to torture them. He didn't want to harm them as such. He just wanted to make a point. And then he'd relieve them of all the gold they didn't need and tell them he'd be sure to use it for good causes. Not being the monster people are expecting, that is part of the mischief. Notably, some of his targets were wealthy churchmen. Also notably, a lot of these stories predate the Church of England, but not all of them. Robin Hood did not like greed, and he didn't like excessive wealth, and he didn't like hypocrisy or abuse of power. He also did not like poverty. He did not valorize or glamorize poverty. So he did something about it from where he was with the tools he had, and here we see what they believed a good leader was. According to these stories, a good leader fills the needs of the people. He provided each of the merry men with cloth of Lincoln green and a stipend for his needs and desires, and for people in need, he provided charity and support. A good leader pays attention, a good leader listens, and a good leader is partly evidenced by the fact that he had hundreds of men gathered around him. Some versions of the stories talk about how they had even perfected an actual whisper network. The men would all climb up into the crowns of the trees of Sherwood Forest and whisper a message between them so they could get a message to the edge of the forest faster than the fastest runner could fly. They practiced listening and memorizing the message and repeating the message so they did not have the telephone game problem. Because as followers, it was important that they get the message right. And they followed well because they knew it was in their interest to do so and because they were inspired. What I've loved about Robin Hood since the beginning, among many other things, is that he did his best to do very little harm. He tried really hard not to hurt people physically or socially or monetarily, and he was always driven by justice. The real Robin Hood may have just been a common thief, we don't know, but the stories tell us what people valued. The stories tell us what people wanted to hold and believe, that there was someone who was smart and powerful and nimble and clever and kind and funny and compassionate, someone who could stand up against the forces of empire when the power structures became destructive and evil, someone who could lead, someone they wanted to follow. They wanted to believe. Robin's band grows over time because he is public about what he does and what he believes, and because the bards spread the story, and because his works are known, and where people encounter him, they want to stay with him. Like some of the people he helps just are like, hey, can I move in? They want what he's offering in a world of injustice and uncertainty. They want who he is. They want to be part of it. That is how things grow. And he's not the only one. Robin, the mythic character, is part of a long line of mythic characters, mischief makers, people who were more clever than the power holders around them and who knew which levers to push, which levers to pull, which buttons were sewed on where. They knew how to hook into the existing power structures and use them rather than winning by bald-faced opposition and brute force. Now, that's not to say that a little loud opposition doesn't have its place. It absolutely does. And raising a wall of objection still does have an impact. Often, unfortunately, it means that the force is just redirected elsewhere, perhaps quietly, perhaps harder to reach. Which is why it is also good to find the people who know how to direct the redirection, how to change the path without anyone noticing until it's too late. Who do you know like that? Who would you follow? Not just, okay, fine, I'll follow, but holy crap, am I excited to follow? Follow. What does followership mean to you? To what or whom are you willing to surrender? To what or whom are you eager to surrender? If that question makes you itchy, I'm pretty sure that makes you normal in this room, but it is important, especially now. How much energy are we wasting on, just for the sake of argument, or this is more of a comment than a question, especially when it comes to movement forward, moving our movement or denomination forward. Would you follow someone imperfect? How would you do that? Well, how would you know if this is a time to speak up, or if whatever it is just not that important and we can keep moving? How would you know if there are material imperfections, or if these are just your pet peeves? Because Robin Hoods, our mischief makers, the ones that we already have, are never going to be perfect, but they are already among us. We don't have to go looking. They're here. So who are our mischief makers? The mischief makers are usually what I call intensives. And who are intensives? Some of you have heard my whole workshop about this. This is from a model I developed. The intensives are the intense people, the too much people, the people who challenge your worldviews, who hold you to higher standards than you're willing to meet. The intensives are probably the people who run your social justice program. The intensives are the people you might have said care too much or are too much. Those are your inciters to mischief. They're not always right, but they're not always wrong. And they are already here. We are already here. We are already in the room. You may also be one of us. See, mischief has two parts. It has ideation, and it has implementation. And so often it gets hung up not at ideation. We do a pretty good job of sitting around the table and fantasizing about what we would do if. But then we stop. We lose momentum. We lack follow-through. We worry about the propriety of what we are considering. But we have in-house experts on mischief. Like, you don't have to be yourself an in-house expert on mischief. We have in-house experts on mischief. Perhaps we should listen to them. We have people among us who already know what it might look like to incite mischief, who can imagine the process of inciting mischief, who can actually implement the plan to make mischief before breakfast without even thinking about it. These people are sometimes our professionals, and sometimes our members, and sometimes our outcasts. Don't look at me like that. You know we have outcasts. I've been a Unitarian Universalist all my life, and I love this faith even though we frustrate me to pieces. And I have never been in a Unitarian Universalist space where there were not outcasts. They're the ones we question. They're the ones we are skeptical of. They're the ones that people get warned off of in coffee hour conversations or in the parking lot. They're the ones that make people uncomfortable. They're the ones that challenge the status quo. They're the ones often who stand alone at coffee hour looking at all those other people having conversations in small groups. They're the ones where if they show up to your chalice group, everyone sort of sighs uncomfortably and wonders if the facilitator can handle them, because they're often also the ones who need something more or different, who envision something more or different, who demand something more or different. They're people who don't fall into the usual patterns. They break the rules, but not the rules that we've all collectively agreed should be broken, but the other rules, the ones we like to pretend are immutable reality, those rules. And sometimes ritual is important, and sometimes ritual is a trap, and these are the people that call us again and again to ask, which one is happening now? They are also sometimes the people we call on in a crisis, even though we have not talked to them for months, when everything goes to hell. These are the people who spend their lives knowing what to do in a crisis, often because they spend their lives in crisis, and I will say inadequately supported in that crisis by their communities. And they have the bruises to show for it. These are the people that know how to think so far outside the box that the box is no longer visible, that boxes are no longer a construct, that the universe does not hold the concept of box. Sometimes that's inconvenient. Could we please get back to the agenda? And sometimes it's useful. These are the ones you automatically plan to reject as soon as they open their mouths, which is often how we miss the opportunity for mischief. When you decide someone has nothing good to offer that would outweigh the trouble they bring, make sure it's true. I'm not saying it's never true, but make sure it's true. Make sure it is for the right reasons. Make sure that that trouble isn't the good trouble, knocking at the door, waiting to be recognized as a prophet. Imagine it, examine it, but put it to the ethos and vision test, not the convenience and comfort test. We mischief makers are here, together with you, some of whom are also mischief makers. We stand on the threshold, we live in the liminal space. We see and do and say things that other people are not able or willing to see and say and do and be. We are your mischief makers. We are already here. We need to be invited in, and not just for the moment of speaking the idea. It is an extraordinary gift to be here in front of you right now. And it is extraordinarily rare for someone like me to be in front of you right now, although less rare than it used to be. And I want to know what happens with these words when you go home. We know basically what we should be doing. We know basically how we should be doing it, but for some reason we are struggling to do it, struggling over and over, struggling with each other, struggling in this place and this time. We are just struggling. It is hard. It's hard to do even when we know what to do. And so I can tell you what I think we should do all day long, which is a little bit sort of the point of this essay series, for us to think together, to figure out what we should do, to move back a little bit, get some perspective, learn some things, figure out how we could do what we do better. So I can tell you what I think, and you can join me in thinking that or not, but the real question is, how? How will we do this? We cannot let ourselves be controlled by our fear of doing it differently from the way we have always done it. Imagine going back to your organization or your congregation or your collegial group or your board and sitting down and saying, what will we have to do? Like, what will we actually have to do? What would we have to change? How would we have to be different right now for that world that we want, or we say we want, right now? And knowing in the ministry, right, knowing that this is discomfiting, knowing that this is upsetting in a world that's already full of upsetting, how can we care and care for, and carry one another through that? How can we make it exciting and steadying and survivable? Because we are keeping ourselves. The most important thing that needs to stay the same right now is our values, what we believe in. In order to keep those the same, the way we behave has got to change. Everything else has to become different. Because this is a moment where the institutions we've relied on to back us up are failing to hold those values at the center. Bless the UUA for working hard to move forward. Because all the other institutions seem to have lost track of where they are going. Not that they were ever perfect, but it is up to us collectively, not just UUs, but all of us who hold those values dear, to chart the course. And it's up to us to create the models. It's up to us to imagine the possibilities and see if we can get ourselves out of this mess. And that might take some loud, it might take some front and center, but mostly it's probably subtle and not infrequently an inside job. Unfortunately, we tend to trip on our own feet. We are not peaceful among ourselves. And among us, the unrest we face is often coming from inside the house, and then we lose our integrity, and then we lose our credibility, both internal and external, and then where are we? But why? What is going on? I had a lot of choices about how to present this essay, and I chose to do it this way, old school, no PowerPoint. It's even on paper. But I don't trust tech not to mess up in the middle of something important, but I did want you to have the one handout that I think we have ready to hand out. Do we have it ready? Excellent. So you'll be getting a handout. A few months ago, there was a declassified document going around the internet. It actually became available a few years ago, but someone found it recently and it became popular for a second. I recognized it immediately because I've been noodling on it for a while. It is a field guide to sabotage written by the OSS, which is the predecessor of the CIA, and the copy that's going around is from World War II. I see some of you have encountered this document. It uses language like quislings, and mostly it talks about how to get sugar into gas tanks and stuff like that. But at the very end, pages 28 to 32 of the original document, there's a little bit about how to sabotage an organization. I thought it was interesting. I'll read you a short excerpt here, but you'll have much more of it in your hands. 11, general interference with organizations and production. Item A, organizations and conferences. 1, insist on doing everything through channels. Never permit shortcuts to be taken in order to expedite decisions. 3, when possible, refer all matters to committees for further study and consideration. Attempt to make the committees as large as possible, never less than 5. Bring up irrelevant issues as frequently as possible. Haggle over precise wordings of communications minutes and resolutions. Refer back to matters decided upon at the last meeting and attempt to reopen the question of the advisability of that decision. Advocate caution, be reasonable, and urge your fellow conferees to be reasonable, and avoid haste, which might result in embarrassments or difficulties later on. Be worried about the propriety of any decision. Raise the question of whether such action as is contemplated is within the jurisdiction of this group, or whether it might conflict with the policy of some higher echelon. Specifically for managers and supervisors, demand written orders. Ask endless questions or engage in long correspondence about such orders. Quibble over them when you can. Hold conferences when there is more critical work to be done. Mischief is a sword that swings both ways. As much as we can take it up, it can also be used against us. Remember, it comes in sideways. It looks like the opposite of what it is. It looks like a useful organizational tool. It seems harmless. But as Douglas Adams reminds us, mostly harmless is harmless until it is not. I have not studied Aikido, but when I was in college, Aikido was very popular among my friends, and the one thing I picked up is this principle of redirection. If someone's coming right at you, in a lot of martial arts, including Tai Chi, which I do study, you'd block, stop the force, brace for impact, maybe try to respond in kind, but you have other choices. You can take the energy they're already expending and shift its focus, move it over, maybe add to it, but get out of the way. You pull them a little bit to one side or the other, you change a little bit, use the momentum they already have. They've expended some energy. What if you used it? Use the systems of power that are already in place, change what's happening the tiniest bit to get where you want to go. You cannot beat empire with a baseball bat and expect it to relent. But if you pull right, it might fall on its face. I'm sure you're wondering how the entire left ended up running its business according to a sabotage manual. Me too. How does something so destructive get so embedded? What pulled us sideways? I do have some guesses. I've been thinking about this for a few years, but like with Robin Hood and Jesus, that's almost not important. What's important now is that this sabotage manual is how someone or something, internal or external, is pulling us a bit to the side of where you want to go. And you know that thing where if you're sailing and your heading is just a little bit off, by the time you get to the other side of the globe, you're not anywhere near where you were headed? Like that. And we've learned it so well, they don't even have to be in the room, whoever this is or whatever this is, for us to be doing it. We have embedded it in our own systems. It's in our bylaws. We have embedded this in our habits. Some of us are slowly wiggling free, but it's slow. And when we combine this with the white supremacy that we know is in play in all of our institutions that we constantly have to guard against, and we think about the ideals of behavior, tone policing, and culturally based critiques that keep people out of leadership, it becomes fairly evident that there's more here. It becomes fairly evident that we could stop it. We are doing this to ourselves now. But we do not have to carry on doing this to ourselves. This is not a tradition we need to keep. In order to stop doing this to ourselves, we have to consider the possibility that at some point we weren't doing it and then something happened and now we are. Wouldn't it be amazing if we stopped again? What if we could stop wasting our energy on so much resistance because our forward momentum was so strong, because where we are going is so powerful? That's what we're up against now, is this powerful forward momentum. But what if our momentum became the new redirect? Of course, that begs the question, where are we going? Who must form vision, if not us? It is not arrogant to say that that is our literal job. It is our job and our call to imagine beyond what anyone can reach. Our job is to be wide and deep and stretchy and impossible before breakfast, especially now. We must imagine. We are secretly ranked with the artists. Why do you think sacred spaces have always been filled with such beauty and feeling? We too make art. Sacred, exquisite art. The imagination of humanity has been vested with us, not just with us, but enough with us. The painters and the poets and the musicians and us, we are all the same. We are all that magical and sacred, ineffable thing, and this is our job, to reify what we can dream. It is our job to reify what we can dream, not alone, but together. Not alone, but with all the people. Bring all the people in. Sanctuary is where we dream in safety. Sanctuary is what makes imagination possible. No wonder they want to violate it, because they long so hard it hurts and it cracks and the blood of 1,000 fears and furies pours out along the fissure, and they want to feel okay, and they are pretty sure beauty is not the way to do that, and they are right. Beauty will lead to ecstasy and passion and unpredictability. It will lead to discomfort. We must practice discomfort. If any among us feel entitled to comfort, let them undo that now. For we can luxuriate in it when it comes, but we cannot grow complacent. Always we must be ready to don our traveling shoes and carry on, carry forward, carry into the unease of transformation, for it is there that life is. For once, our suffering can mean something. Of course, it's not all suffering. Some of the best moments are surprises and closer to home than we think. So Robin Hood is part of this long line, and that line, as it turns out, is partly mine. I'm sure you're all shocked. When I was born, my father won the discussion about my name, choosing it and then transliterating it from Hindi's Devanagari script to Roman characters. What does it mean? My mother asked. Playful, he told her. As it turns out, as it often turned out, that was a convenient half-truth. When I was in India, when I was 24, on my big "what the hell is my heritage about anyway" trip, it was bound to happen, 3 of my several times removed cousins, giggling, asked me if I knew what my name meant. I answered, but their giggles had me suspicious. Y'all are right. Playful? I said, uncertainly. They giggled again, more whispering behind hands, as if I, as a monolingual English speaker, could possibly have lip-read their amused Hindi. Of course, now I was curious, a little defensive, uncertain, and a little irate, if truth be told. My father has a long habit of not quite giving me all the information I need for things, which led to a lot of finding out for myself, but it was also exhausting. Wait, what does it mean then? Much more giggling. Finally, I got it out of them in broken Hindi and English with some extravagant gesturing to bridge the gap. It more or less came down to, the erotic play of the gods that created the universe. Playful. Oh, just that then. Oh, and also, addendum footnote, Krishna's mischief. What now? I didn't grow up steeped in Hinduism. My father claims that he's an atheist. And although it rubbed off on me in thousands of tiny ways, like Easter lily pollen turning everything slightly orange while looking entirely innocent, I had never heard of Krishna Lila before that moment. Krishna Lila is the mischief that the god Krishna plays, often to teach humans a lesson. Apparently, my father expected, hoped, intuited that I would become the embodiment of that thing, and then probably afterwards regretted that he was right. When Krishna was a child even, his mother tied the yogurt up at the ceiling out of the way because he kept eating it before it was ready, like before it's dinner time. And so Krishna got a group of friends together and they built a human/god pyramid to get it down. And he broke it and it got all over his head, and that's now how we celebrate his birthday. He's like that his whole life. Our family's goddess has always been and continues to be Kali, and by adjacency Shiva. My own altar has Ardhanarishvara on it, who is a half Shiv, half Shakti, god, goddess, deity, for obvious reasons, because of course it does. But even they are from the Shiv-Shakti branch of the pantheon. Krishna is one of the fishes of Vishnu, the preserver, so like a different branch. And most families stick to one branch or another, but he and Radha, his consort, have always held a special place in my heart, and apparently now I know why. So Krishna, who loves to play the field with gopis and tends to represent generosity and abundance and possibility in the stories, but is also the one who delivers the Bhagavad Gita, as Arjuna's charioteer in the Mahabharata, has this playful, transformative mischief. His tricks become parables in the tradition of tricksters everywhere, and they are collectively called Leela, Krishna Leela. So my first thought when I finally found all this out was, well, that tracks. My father, the trickster, my namesake, the tricks themselves, me, the trickster, and there are so many more. Parvati looked mostly harmless until she became Kali. In the human world, there's a story of an Indian hero, I saw this from Shiv Ram Das on Blue Sky, about how this guy was once being hunted on a train, so he disguised himself as the conductor and went car to car with the searchers, helping them look. Nope, don't see him over there. In the book Snow Treasure, which I mentioned earlier, it's a true story of children who secured the gold bullion of Norway during World War II for future and for their allies by sledding it from its storage caves down to the coast. It was like strapped to their flexible flyers. And they would hide it and build a snowman and then disappear, and then a captain would come and collect it under cover of night. Everyone has power somewhere, and their power was in being children. Where's your power? If the trick is that you are not who you have thought yourself to be, who you have been told you are, who you've been handed by empire, who are you and what can you do? For real. And who will you help and who will you harm by doing that? The beauty of a well-made mischief is that it is as harmless as possible to the innocent and even to the guilty. But we must retain our own integrity. When the opponent becomes the enemy, how then shall we respond? When do we have to attack the people on the highway, or do we? How shall we know our enemy? What within us might also be enemy? We must remove ourselves from cruelty and vengeance and instead imagine another justice. One in which the officers search the whole train car with us while we are disguised and come up empty and go home. If you've not trained yourself in these thinkings, you could do worse than to begin with Birbal and Robin Hood and Krishna and Anansi the Spider. These are not new forms of thought. These are not new ideas. Beloveds, we can turn that drawing upside down and copy it that way so that we draw what is there and not what we wish for. So then we can build our wishes and not history's blueprints. Where do you think you know you don't belong? Maybe you do belong there. Where do you think you cannot succeed? Maybe you can. Maybe we can. What do you think is justice? What could it be instead? In what place, in what ways do we need to give up our shoulders or our spines like an octopus to slip through the gap, to be soft enough to not be hurt by temporary reformation of what appears to be vital and inherent shape and color? Could we walk upright anyway, even as an octopus? Is walking bipedally that important? What else is or isn't important? In what ways have we been lied to about being upright, beloveds? In what moments are we the ones lying to ourselves? In what ways could our lies reveal truths that lead us forward? How else could we be? And if we were to be like that, what would be possible? What would be different? I offered you page 28 and following of a sabotage manual. If any of these remind you of policies or procedures you may have seen or traditions you may have seen somewhere, I invite you to consider their location in a sabotage manual. And if you try to change them, watch those very things rise up. Watch us, page 28, sabotage ourselves. What hydras do we have in our midst? When Kali emerged from Parvati's protective fury, it was to defeat a demon that grew more heads when one was cut off, and more selves from each drop of blood that hit the ground. Kali drank the blood. The demon was a riddle, her tongue was a carpet, a solution, rage answering horror. How have we lied to ourselves out of habit or conditioning with the best of intentions? How shall we free ourselves from this demon, these shackles, together? How shall we free ourselves from fruitless arguments and petty disagreements and ideas of impossibility? There is a world burning, and the demons will make quick work of our dear ones. If we cannot agree on something, what is the most playful way to move forward together away from destruction? Maybe someone is moving already. Can we follow them? Can following be the unexpected move? There's an old book, Apartment Therapy, in which the author recommends that you reconceive your space by sitting somewhere you never sit to understand the room differently. And those among us who have sat in the congregation for a long time before we reverse position to sit on the chancel will know something of this. But where else can we sit? What does the sanctuary look like from outside the locked door? Could it be a fortress, a foyer, a stargate, a gateway? Everything can be something else. Staff structures, classrooms, ways of learning, knowing, being. Ani DeFranco tells us every tool is a weapon if you hold it right, and every weapon can also be a tool. Every weapon, even religion. We of all faiths know how to be unexpectedly religious, and we know how terribly religion can and has been weaponized. But what if we didn't do that? What if unexpectedly, mischievously religious good instead? We could be teaching people how to be Unitarian Universalists. Our lore is that we figure it out for ourselves, each of us. You go inside, you find your own theology. But what if that is abandonment of hungry beginners who do not know how to fish? We teach our kids. Learning is not debasement. What if we taught our adults? How should we be good Unitarian Universalists, and how can we even discuss it if we haven't been practicing? So how are we and our people practicing? Do we talk about it? Do we name it? Do we teach it? Let's turn it all upside down, because whatever we're doing to transmit it, it's not working. But the faith is strong, and so many people need us. The world needs us. Where are we? We have got to stop whimpering in the corner collectively. We have good work happening in some quarters, not that nothing is happening, but the rest of us are lost. Fulgham has that essay about hide and seek and how you shouldn't hide too well because you got to make it possible to get yourself found. It's a really old essay. We got to get ourselves found. We are lost from our own faith. We have stopped practicing together loudly enough to rock the boat. We need to be in sync in a way that we haven't been for a generation since before my time. I'm 50 and I was born to this faith. We like mischief, remember? We're proud of it. I learned all this stuff in church. If we are to contribute to that kind of change, if we are to seed the movement of our world, who are you going to start with? Transformative mischief is powerful and nimble and creative and playful and everywhere. Which bit is your bit? The time is now. We are neither alone nor inventing this anew nor starting a movement among ourselves. We have a legacy of our own, of mischief, of rebellion, of choosing outside and outside and outside, because outside the norm is so often where our values lie. We have our honor, and we do hold on to it sometimes. Sometimes we recognize the heroes we have before it's too late. Mostly we recognize them 2 generations later. We do not need to look elsewhere, and also we come from a long line of elsewhere. We come from history. We bend the arc of history. We make history. So how shall we be Unitarian Universalists now? Do we teach it enough? I'm suggesting not. Do we live it enough? In this moment, that remains to be seen. I believe in us. I believe every one of us wants to be convictable of our faith because we are convicted of our faith. We are convinced to the bones, or at least enough on our bad days, that this is the right path for us, and it is leading us to the best choices if only we can listen hard enough. Because I also believe in free will, that we make our own decisions informed by or despite the wisdom we have available to us. We are not flawless, and I am not demanding that. We are capable of more and better, and I am demanding that. To do that, we need community. So we can practice together, practice uphill, practice pushing that stone while not allowing the stone to become the thing that unites us. We need community so we can practice together, practice uphill, practice pushing the stone while not allowing the stone to become the thing that unites us. But we do need communities of practice, communities where we do the thing and talk about the thing we did and then try to do it better, repeat, repeat, repeat. Oh wait, that's ritual. Meaning-infused repetition meant to transform ourselves in the world, huh? Ritual and meaning and spirit and community. That's religion. Oh, look, that's religion. We are a religion. What do we do? But also, how do we do it? That's the part we can teach. How to be in community, how to be in healthy conflict, how to call people in, how to set and hold boundaries, how to run a meeting, how to make space for all the feelings, how to stand down, how to listen without advising or interrupting, how to do what is needed, how to give what is asked for, how to communicate clearly, how to be together, how to pray, how not to assume that people know things, how to define belonging without assuming people know things when they first walk in, how to require people to learn things, how to help people know things, how to welcome people in. I learned all that in church, in youth group, in Sunday school. What I know I learned mostly before I turned 18, mostly in our congregations and in local, district, and national youth programming. We learned by practice, we learned by doing, we learned by existing cultural norms set by the youth before us. We the grown-ups, apparently I have become a grown-up, can choose to learn. We can choose to support our youth. We can choose to learn from them. We can choose not to dismantle the carefully built organizations that support them. They are the carriers of our faith, and we keep destroying their temples and with them losing generations of leaders. We can learn from them, and we need to learn from them. And when we teach our adults, they will be ready to be in community with our youth when they grow up. When we know these things, when we do not fall prey to page 28, we can do almost anything, and we can do it in love. We have done this before. I learned this in church about rebels and heretics, about sex. AYS, about our sexuality, was a brilliant piece of transformative mischief. We said, what is the most radical thing a church can do about sexuality education in the 60s? We could talk about sex in church. We could talk about it openly. We could talk about it broadly. We could talk about it non-judgmentally. We could be the opposite of what everyone thinks church is about sex, because that's what's in alignment with our true values. we could do something completely different from what everyone else is doing, and we did, and that program specifically changed my life, specifically in so many ways. It changed my life around sexuality, it changed my life around leadership, and it changed how I think about learning and education and growth. I committed myself to leadership in the Unitarian Universalist Association because of the existence of AYS when I was 13. Everything since that has been downhill because in that program we were proving that we were somebody I could be proud of. That we did things that were complicated and hard in the world because they backed up what we believed in. And it certainly didn't hurt that it went against everyone else's expectations of what church was, because even at that age I had run into a lot of discomfort among my peers with the fact that I was a church kid. How could we do the opposite of what everyone expects a church to do when churches are being the worst version of themselves? Not that we all identify as churches, but that's what people think of us as. How can we do the opposite of what we expect ourselves to do when we are being the worst version of ourselves? How can we hold on to the dream long enough to give it those famous roots and wings? How can we be what would make you proud? Proud, fiercely proud, holy crap, I'm excited, proud, want to shout it to the sky, proud. What would make you proud to be part of this community? So proud you couldn't help yourself with a little evangelism. We can ask those same, what would we have to do the opposite questions about everything, wherever we are and whatever we're doing, however we're doing it. Let's ask those questions, not to tear ourselves apart, but to bring us all together. Mischief, individual acts of mischief, can happen quietly and solo. That's not a bad thing. Need to know basis is security. It's really smart, and often effectiveness in action. But the spirit and the binding ideals and the inspiration and the movement, that happens together. Unfortunately, we often ask those questions of the leaders, and then we watch as their ideas get watered down by committees and through process and fear, and then there's like nothing left of the flame. What if we didn't do that to each other? How small does the group need to be before you can just do it as a pilot, as an experiment? How will we go home and handpick the 5 or 10 people in our organizations that we think can make a difference right now? For starters, just small, individual. What would it be like if we actually moved this or changed that or drove this forward? How would that go? What do you think? And then move with them in imagination, traverse with them in the dream from where you are across the gap to the vision. Build the whole picture out, tell the story, use the imagining that we have to show who the world could be if this were different. How? The answer is with us already. If we do it together, it works together with other people. Don't do it alone. The dreaming happens in community and sanctuary. We know that when multiple people go to a conference together, they tend to implement whatever they learn better, because when they go back, they're not alone. They're not trying to explain the weird, ineffable magic thing that happened all by themselves. So right now, I'm inviting you to take out your phones if they're not already out, or your notepads, whatever you're taking notes on, and write down the names of 5 people that you are going to invite into your mischief when you get home. It can be a small mischief. If starting mischief is not your gift, maybe pick someone who can help you start it. But here's the thing, the same way toxicity grows, so too can joy and needed transformation. Use the tool in unexpected ways, come in the side door, leave before people notice. Shh, it's a surprise. Also, before you leave the room, exchange contact information with 2 people near you and get in touch after GA so that you can remember together. We have the opportunity to imagine and live into something richer, fuller, happier, stronger. The most powerful thing we can do is imagine. Imagine something better. Imagine something bolder. Imagine something effective and full of care and shot through with our values, even if it does not solve every single problem on the planet by tomorrow. What we can imagine, we can create, probably. And every congregation, every community, every small group is a sandbox. Imagine using our congregations and our institutions and our organizations to create the thing, whatever it is, in microcosm. Tiny instances everywhere of strong, caring community, fully funded systems, a year of maternity leave, reconceived methods for growth and teaching and learning and community building, bigger umbrellas, wider open doors, more mutable, more interdependent, more strong, more safe, more us. What would it look like? What would it feel like? I know we always say that people are slow and institutions need to move slowly, and certainly there are risks to moving fast. Certainly people are scared, but are we not scared now? If we aren't, we should be. Should we not let our fear of becoming something that is anathema to ourselves be stronger than our fear of changing our ways? How can we make sure that who we are, our values, our core, doesn't change, even if that means everything else does have to be different? What mischief will you start so that we can live into a world that is different? So that we can live into the world that we still dream about despite everything? So that we can live into the world where nobody has to worry about fleeing a country for their life, where nobody has to fear that they won't have any place to go? My internship supervisor, Brian Kopke of blessed memory, used to get this little twinkle in his eye and a little crooked grin. And then he'd say to his board, "Let's run an experiment." Let's imagine, he meant, in real time with real players. Let's just try it. Let's try something. Let's play. And he led that church for over 20 years. Ministries, like stories, like parables, endure for all kinds of reasons, but the good ones endure because there is something bold and kind and true about them, not because they are perfect. And the truest thing is that you're either changing or you're dead. Just ask anyone in perimenopause. The changes never truly stop. They don't stop. Life is lived in motion. Imagination is motion. Let's run an experiment. This is where the good mischief begins. Thank you.
That was amazing. All right now, please welcome our respondent, the Reverend Dr. Adam Robersmith.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Leela. I am the Reverend Dr. Adam Robersmith. I am a white-passing, multiracial queer person wearing a black suit and a gray clergy shirt. This challenge to us to play, experiment, make mischief, and then to consider carefully when mischief is being made and by whom and for whose benefit and how is very timely. And I'm honored that you asked me to respond, and a little surprised perhaps, because I don't generally think I'm known for being mischievous as a colleague. My friends here and beyond will stop snickering now. Considering your thoughts, the shape of them, the taste of them, the call of them, I find myself wanting especially to speak to those of us for whom mischief is uncomfortable, for whom this moment is not in any way the ministry that we envisioned or aimed for. I want to speak to those of us who doubt that we were made for this moment. I am right there with you. I have had more than a few times where I've wondered if I had the strength for all of this on top of everything else that I and we have been through. From my years in ministry, I could tell you stories of flooded basements and bullies,
arrested congregants, and international terrorist attacks thwarted, and I wish I were joking about that, as well as COVID and the rise of global and local fascism. And I know you have your own stories, or you will, if you're just starting religious leadership. And all of that makes all of this that much more daunting, or worse. So for those of us who don't prefer to resist, who are reluctant intensives, for those of us who overcome our discomfort because our beliefs and our relationships insist that we do the good things that worry us, I want to speak to those of us who don't like breaking things, rules, laws, norms, processes. I remember my great-grandma Quigley, deeply Irish, deeply attentive to what was right, teaching me how to color in the lines as a child. And I learned well. And then eventually I started painting with watercolors. And I'd figured out that sometimes going outside the lines was inevitable. And sometimes it actually made for the better painting. I learned to sing. And then I discovered I had to learn to sing badly for a role in a musical if the role was going to go well. I learned that what was necessary, what was right, actually changed a bit depending on circumstances and needs. So sometimes in order to not break relationships, hearts, and spirits, we have to be willing to know how and when to break rules and norms for best effect without breaking communities, without breaking covenants, and without breaking the trust of those we serve. To be very clear, misconduct is not mischief. Government sabotage manuals are not good operating procedures for congregations or denominations. Breaking the care we share in covenant with one another is not mischief. So when we break rules and norms and not care and trust, even then, sometimes we don't manage best effect. We learn by experimenting. And if we experiment, sometimes we get it wrong. I want you to think about many of the rules that we have around preaching. They are designed to remind us that our preaching needs to point to something greater, something beyond ourselves. So, I'm sure you've heard this, don't tell the congregation your process for writing the sermon during the sermon. And there's a reason for that. Too often, telling people the process points back to ourselves, not to something greater. And on very rare occasion, sharing some process can be truly instructive and enlightening. Remember, the pulpit is not a confessional. And also, know that part of our ministry is the work of demonstrating what it is to be human, with laughter and tears and mistakes and brilliance and just getting through the day with one another. If you need confession, call a good officer, a spiritual director, a therapist, the person that you harmed. If you think you have something human to share that has value, think carefully about it and why it's worth sharing. Nancy MacDonald Ladd has said it well to me, and I bet to others of us here, preach from scars, not wounds. Preach from where you have healed so that what you share points to something greater rather than only back to yourself. And so I find myself thinking about mischief as a practical preaching. How can it aim toward something greater rather than just be self-serving? What if we remember that we color outside the lines, right? As Unitarian Universalists, we are countercultural. What if we remember how we are Unitarian Universalists points to something even greater than Unitarian Universalism? And then, what do we do if, when we consider how we are living our faith, we discover that it isn't pointing to something greater? What if we discover that we are replicating old patterns in new ways because that's what we know? What if we discover that we're trying to insist that ways of being that were cutting-edge progressive in the 1950s or the 1980s or the 1830s were good enough then and certainly are good enough now? This is when breaking paradigms, finding new frameworks, experimenting is essential. Mischief is a way of opening up possibilities beyond the expected, confounding what is intended, usual, normal. So much of my service and ministry is grounded in my inability to ignore what is true and then do what is necessary in the face of it, regardless of my desire for comfort or ease. And that means I have to improvise and play and experiment. I take my theological cues from the natural world, and I am delighted to tell you that nature experiments all of the time. Many experiments fail, but some excel. Evolution does not mean we give up everything that has ever worked before. It means we find additional new ways so that things can work better. So we choose how to experiment. We explore what we can adapt. We make new niches. We find new ways forward. How can we do community life and congregational life and denominational life in ways that meet this moment? How can we find what is best for us? How can we learn to thrive in changing circumstances? One of my favorite forms of experimentation is showing up in unexpected ways. Once you think you know what I'm going to wear or how my hair is done or what my facial hair looks like, I desperately want to change it. So I got my septum piercing at a GA about 10 years ago. And a few of my tattoos at other General Assemblies as well. Hello to my tattoo buddies out in the room. I said to you that I was wearing a black suit. That is true. I am wearing a leather black suit and a linen clergy collar in honor of another mischievous colleague who once did the same. Hello, Daryl. Because it tweaks what we expect. It brings me joy. It encourages me to be a little more daring. And so if this small form of my mischief, this trickster shape-shifting that I happen to like, if that's what this is, then I need to spend some time thinking about how I can break people's expectations for best effect. How can who I am and what I do help move us toward love, toward beloved community, the kingdom of the holy, a true democracy without supremacy or oppression? How can I show up in unexpected, even daring ways, such that the norms I break crack open possibility for others too? I give you those questions for yourselves. How can who you are and what you do help us move toward love, beloved community, the kingdom of the holy, a true democracy without supremacy or oppression. How can you show up such that the norms that you break crack open possibility for others? What sorts of mischief, experimentation, play are you good at? How can you use that in your service of something greater? So if you're a reluctant intensive, meet yourself where you are. Find your mischief. Find the place within you that understands how to do things differently in order to point to something larger, better, more holy. Do the thing that you are called to do by your convictions, your commitments, and your covenants. And if that comes with discomfort, remember that discomfort and harm are not the same thing. Discomfort is a normal condition of learning, growth, and development. And if you are an enthusiastic intensive, an experienced maker of good trouble, please encourage the rest of us, right? All of you out there, please encourage the rest of us. Cherish and cheer on our versions of mischief. Teach us how to use them well, and keep calling us into the service of the holy. So thank you, Leela, for encouraging us and for teaching us and for calling us forward into that sacred service. Like you, I believe that we can make and remake ourselves to become what is needed now. I believe that if we are grounded in our covenants and communities, we will be compelled to do something, even if we wish it were not ours to do. And in that spirit, I hope you don't mind if I grumble for a little while before I get on with it. But I will get on with it, probably today. And I know that you all will too. Bless you. Thank you.
Friends, we have been blessed this year with our Berry Street essay and response, for sure. And on behalf of all members of the Berry Street Executive Committee, thank you to our essayist, Reverend Leela Singha, and respondent, Reverend Dr. Adam Rober-Smith. Thank you to outgoing Executive Committee member, Reverend Aisha Ansano, and to continuing members, Reverend Elizabeth Stevens and Reverend Eric Cherry, whose terms end in 2026 and 2027, respectively. I am excited to announce that Reverend Margalie Belizaire will be joining the Berry Street Executive Committee for a 3-year term, beginning this year and serving through 2028. And now, it is my pleasure to announce that our 2026 Berry Street essayist will be, drum roll please. You guys are good at that. Reverend Sarah Lawal. And with that, I now call to a close the ministerial conference in Berry Street for 2025 and look forward to seeing you all next year. Go in peace and make mischief.
Thank you, everyone. Now, we knew this was going to be a tight connection if you were wanting to watch the General Assembly. So we have planned a little watch party. We had planned to stream on our equipment. The watch party, the AV, obviously we're a little late, but not too bad, I think. And it was for a good reason, because what an essay. Thank you so much. So we were going to take about 10 minutes to reset the AV for the watch party, and we'll be good to go. So to have a break, anyone registered for General Assembly is welcome to stay and watch the watch party. Great work, team. Wow.